Good afternoon. I will call to order the September 17th meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. My name is Matt Brown. I serve as president of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Ellison, Kronzer, Schrader, Sweezy, Coleman, Cogill, and Rockwell. At this time, I'll ask that you silence any mobile devices, and we can get started with our meeting. First item of business today is to approve the actions from the August 27th meeting. Commissioners may have a motion to approve those actions. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. Next, we will sort through the agenda. We'll determine which items will be considered on consent, which we will discuss, and which will be continued to another meeting. You can find hard copies of the agenda in the hallway. Starting at the top, item 1 is Mosaic Phase 3 at 1320 Lagoon Avenue, 1350 Lagoon Avenue, and 2900 Fremont Avenue South. Conditional use permit for some modifications to the PUD for a master sign plan. Commissioner Kronzer, I know earlier you had some questions about that. I think you've had those answered, though, so we can see if anyone else would like to speak on item 1. Seeing no one, we'll put item 1 on consent. Item 2 is at 3018 17th Avenue South. That's an expansion of a non-conforming use. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 2? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Item 3 is at 2805 26th Avenue South. That's a conditional use permit to allow a third dwelling unit. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 3? Seeing no one, we'll put item 3 on consent. Item 4 is the liquor exchange at 2819 through 2821 Nicollet Avenue. Conditional use permit for an off-sale liquor store at that location. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 4? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Item 5 is at 1001 through 1015 Glenwood Avenue, a conditional use permit for a school, also a conditional use permit for building height. We'll discuss item 5, and just so I have a sense, is there anyone here to speak on item 5? So we have a couple people here. We'll discuss that item. Item 6 is Loring Community School at 2600 44th Avenue North. That's conditional use permit and site plan review for a school addition. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 6? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Item 7 is 2027, 2029, and 2033 West Broadway, 2301 Oliver Avenue North, 2104 and 2106 23rd Avenue North, and 2101 West Broadway. Several applications related to a building addition at that location. That item will be continued to the October 1st meeting. So if anyone is here for item 7, that will be considered on October 1st. Item 8 is 1125 Lagoon. That is at 1116 West Lake Street. Several applications for a new multifamily building at that location. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 8? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Item 9 is the zoning code text amendment related to the definition of entertainment. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 9? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Item 10 is the zoning code text amendment related to split zoning. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 10? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Finally, item 11 is also a zoning code text amendment related to rooftop mechanical equipment, penthouses, and height. And is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 11? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. So our agenda as amended is as follows. Items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 11 will be on consent. We'll discuss item 5, and item 7 will be continued to the October 1st meeting. Commissioners may have a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. Next, we can move on to our Committee of the Whole consent agenda. And Vice President Lupke Peer, do you have an update for us from August 30th?
Excuse me. Yes, we had a land acquisition for the Emergency Stabilization Pilot Program that was approved as being found consistent with the Minneapolis Comp Plan. And we also had a land sale at 3950 Thomas Avenue North that was approved, is also being consistent with the Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan for Sustainable Growth.
All right, and I will take that as a motion to find that those items are consistent with the comprehensive plan. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, may I have a motion to continue item 7 to the October 1st meeting? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our public hearings, and at this time, I'll open the public hearing for the items on the consent agenda. Again, that's items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Once again, is anyone here to speak on any of those items? And seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our one item for discussion. That is item 5, 1001 through 1015 Glenwood Avenue. And staff is Ms. Rouse.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. As you mentioned, this is an application at 1001 and 1015 Glenwood Avenue, 2 conditional use permits, one for the use as a school and a second to increase the height for the penthouse, the elevator overrun. Currently, the site is zoned C3A with the pedestrian-oriented overlay district. It's on Glenwood Avenue, which is a commercial corridor, and it's designated as mixed use. The aerial image showing where the site is. The applicant is proposing to renovate the existing building and then add 2 additional floors to the existing circulation core at the southwest end of the site in order to provide adequate fire access or means of egress from the 3rd and 4th floors. They would redesign the parking lot that is currently in front of the building in order to accommodate the vehicles, add landscaping as shown here all along Glenwood Avenue and on the south end of the site. And then the current metal building on the east end that's right against Colfax Avenue would be used for additional parking in order to meet their minimum parking ratio. And then they have shown that they can accommodate all of the bus movements for drop-offs and pickups on site. And then as far as the CUP for additional height, it would be increasing it from 56, which is the allowable, to 59 feet 10 inches. And that's, as I mentioned, for the elevator and the stair core. Staff has found that the school would not be a detriment to or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, or general welfare, would not impede the development of surrounding properties. The site does have adequate utilities, access, and drainage to accommodate the school. Traffic congestion, as I mentioned, could be handled on site. They're meeting their parking ratio, and they're showing that they have adequate room for bus drop-off and pickup on site. It does meet the comprehensive plan land use policies as outlined on page 3 of your staff report. However, it does mention that it is designated as mixed use as far as the small area plans go in the comp plan. But with recommended conditions of approval, it would conform to the district regulations. And staff has 5 recommended conditions of approval, which are noted here. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, and commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Hearing none, I will open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first. If there's someone here who can speak on behalf of the applicant. And please state your name and address for the record. Let us know if there's anything you'd like to add to the staff presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Carol Lansing. I'm representing the applicant, who is the building property owner and wishes to lease that building to Yuba Medical Academy. For our presentation, first Nancy Alexa with Servo is going to talk to you just a little bit about the building improvements, and if you have any questions regarding that. And then Musa Farrar, who is the school's director, is going to speak to you about the school, and I'll end by addressing the CUP applications.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Alexiuk with Swervo Development. Do you need me to spell my name or anything? Or
No,
we're
that's fine.
Swervo purchased the building about 2 years ago. It had been vacant. It was originally built, the historic part was originally built as a creamery, probably back in the early 1900s, 1910, 1920. We typically buy buildings that need serious renovation, and this one, because it was built as a creamery and had been used as a lab, had some, significant issues with it before it could really be turned into anything else. And so we've kind of been going through that process, and we're approached by Uba Medical Academy a little bit ago, and they're interested in leasing the property.
All right, and commissioners, are there any questions for the speaker? Hearing none, we can see if anyone else would like to speak on this item. Okay. And please state your name and address for the record.
Council, I'm the school director of Uba Medical Academy in Hopkins at present. Uba started at 277 12th Avenue North, Minneapolis, 2004. And at that time, we had that building as 3 different schools, K through 12, but divided into 3 charter schools. And as we continue, 2007, we outgrew of the building, which was not enough to us, and we moved it to, we get luckily a building in Hopkins, Catherine Karen Elementary School used to be. Maybe some of you graduate from that elementary school. And we've been welcomed very well when we reached there, when we landed over there. The mayor, the superintendent of schools, and the police commissioner all met us the very first day, July 1st, that we were moving there. Since then, Uba started at the beginning 2004 as 120 students. When we moved to Hopkins, we were almost 250 students. And as we continue growing, all that years, our population is mainly from Minneapolis. 80%, I gave you a kind of a folder, and you see, all of you, this is the picture. The tallest bar is the bar that is from Minneapolis. The rest of students, Hopkins, where we live, we only get 4 students from Hopkins. St. Louis Park, Eden Prairie, Edina, we get about 10 students. The rest of our students come from either, some of them, about 15 students come from St. Paul, some from Brooklyn Park, and mostly 80% of our students come from Minneapolis, mainly. And we're not just a school, we are a good school. We are a highly rewarded school. Last about 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015, we were all designated as a reward high school from the Department of Education or Department of Education in Minnesota. We're one of the best schools. Our authorizer is PUC, and our history is in the book. The only reason we were coming back, we love Hopkins. We love it because they respect us and we get what we want. But one of the difficult things we have is when we have parent-teacher conference or when we have to meet a child's parents, it takes them long hours or even days to come. We never get more than 50% of our parents on parent-teacher conference, which is when the parents and the teachers meet. And the reason parents are complaining is you are too far. Well, luckily, at the end, we now found a building in 105 Gillenwood Avenue that was, abandoned for a long time, but now it's gonna come to life. And we were, in the beginning, I want you to understand, we were in Minneapolis. We were in 277 12th Avenue, North Minneapolis. Therefore, we outgrew, we couldn't get a building in Minneapolis, we moved to Hopkins, and we're now coming back. Therefore, we're not outsiders to Minneapolis. The middle school and the elementary school that are right now in the same building are our feeders. When their middle school graduate from where they are, they come to Hopkins. We mostly get at most 40% because the next 60% of the graduating class says to us, it's too far. parents don't want to drive that long. If you have any questions, I can answer.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I don't think, actually, we do have one question. Commissioner Cron.
Yeah, I have a question about your site plan. I'm interested to know, you have pedestrians walking right through the bus drop-off area. I find that not a terribly safe condition. Have you thought about how to get pedestrians to the front door from the public sidewalks without having to walk through the bus drop-off area, which are, we all know how big school buses are and how hard it is to see children.
So I wasn't familiar with that process or that part of the site plan review. So it's certainly something we can take a look at. We did spend some time looking at the entrance and security and some of those issues for the school, as well as ADA access. So I apologize, I don't have a great answer for that question, but that is something that we can certainly take a look at.
So we understand from comments that you've received and from discussion in the neighborhood that there are people who are going to ask you to deny this CUP largely because for school, because they would rather have office or retail in this location on Glenwood. I believe it's been argued that the school use isn't consistent with the Bassett Creek Valley Master Plan. To the contrary, a high school is consistent with the applicable land use guidance, as has been indicated to you by staff. As an initial point, I want to let you know I reviewed the entire Bassett Creek plan to see how they address new schools, and they don't address it at all. They don't say there's any place in that whole valley they should be, and they don't say there's any place that they shouldn't be. They're just really an ignored use. But the Bassett Creek Plan, more recently the Van White Memorial Plan and the city's comp plan all guide this site as mixed use. And although the Bassett Creek Plan has a rather specific vision of what they'd like to see for mixed use with retail and housing above it, the city's mixed use category is not that fine-grained, and the city has not applied and should not apply small area plans to be that prescriptive. So with respect to comprehensive plan guidance, Stephanie's report does include land use policy 1.10 regarding commercial corridors that indicate they support a mix of uses, and it's a broader description of mix of uses than you find in some small area plans, but is applicable, which includes institutional use. In the education chapter of the comp plan, more specifically, they encourage both public and private institutions to provide a wide range of educational choices for Minneapolis students throughout the city, and particularly encourage them to locate in transit-oriented sites like commercial corridors. So location of a school on a commercial corridor is specifically within the more specific land use guidance we have. So while Glenwood is a commercial corridor, and we certainly hope for a mix of uses that will include retail and office, schools are equally appropriate. Now, the zoning of this area, after the Bassett Creek Plan, it was rezoned to C3A. The commercial districts are mixed-use districts, so it's consistent with the guidance there. And as you can see from the purpose statements for both commercial uses districts generally and the C3A district, it's a little hard to see there, specifically, both districts are intended to include institutional uses and also promote adaptive reuse of existing buildings, which is what this proposal will do. So why are we here with a CUP? It's consistent with the guidance of mixed use. A CUP includes other standards than just consistency with the comprehensive plan. And I'll note for you that other types of schools, preschools, early childhood learning centers, and vocational schools are permitted uses in the commercial districts. Why does a K through 12 require a CUP and not these others? I think we know that K-12 schools have some unique traffic generation concerns and issues and challenges with the come in the morning, leave in the afternoon, cars and buses mingling together, and after school activities. I also think that they can be larger, and there's concern about how their site transitions into and is buffered and in character with surrounding properties. But it's not about the type of use and consistent with comp plan. It's about the other characteristics that come with that use that make it a CUP, as I understand it. So in light of the fact that K through 12 schools are allowed in commercial districts with a CUP, and that then it can't simply be that they're not commercial enough as a reason to deny them. The staff report found that the use complies with all the CUP criteria in addition to land use guidance, so we request that you approve the CUPs for this use.
Great, thank you. And commissioners, are there any questions? Commissioner Lukey-Peer.
Yeah, I just was wondering, in reference to all the comments that we did get in regard to, I'm sorry, I have a cough drop, to the concerned neighbors. Do you know of any meetings that took place between the applicant and the neighborhood, and if so, what the outcome was of those meetings? Because there was a lot of people wrote in about that, and I'm not sure what the outcome was.
I've only recently come on since we saw that there was opposition, and I think they met with, Nancy can tell you about who they met with.
That'd be great.
I also think that in terms of timing, while the building's been on the market for lease for some time, the school use kind of came up in a time frame that required moving ahead in order to start work for them to open next year.
So we met last week with, I believe it was the Glenwood Revitalization meeting at the Harrison neighborhood group. There was, I think, 5 neighbors present, asked a lot of questions. A couple of the neighbors were pretty adamant that they did not want to see a school relocate to Glenwood, that they would prefer an office tenant or something like that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ellison.
I think that was my question too. I was
Okay.
wondering if you had spoken with any neighborhood associations. So I think that covers. So thank you.
Right. Any further questions of the applicant? Commissioner Cogill.
For the owner of the building, I'm wondering, what have you ever operated a school site before? Is this the first building that? What precipitated the decision to allow this tenant as opposed to a different type of use?
Well, we're a commercial real estate developer, and we have had other properties in our portfolio that have been look good for a school. Some of that depends on how they lay out the actual structure of the facility and some of the attributes that come along with it. So we have worked on some charter schools in some other cities. We have owned this building for a couple of years, and typically when we purchase a building and begin kind of the process, we look to see what types of interest there is. And this is the only interest that has actually come forward for this property.
And if I may add, Yuba will operate the school, and the owner won't be involved in those kind of operations.
Right. Any further questions of the applicant? Commissioner Lukey-Peer.
I actually had a question for the school representative. Yeah, I was just wondering if you could maybe speak to any, if there any outreach efforts were made to the neighbors and surrounding residents about the school. If you could talk a little bit about that.
No, I didn't meet anybody. We were planning to go, but I heard if everything has finished it. I mean, they already did it. But at the same time, this building was abandoned for the last 10, 20 years. Mm-hmm. Why is the problem when we try to revive it? I mean, we're coming back. We are home alone. Hopkins is a foreign to us. Mm-hmm. And that's the only reason why we came back to here.
If you're opening a high school, I mean, are you interested at all in seeing if any residents would, engage in terms of enrollment, even to talk about? I mean, I would imagine a charter school would want to make sure their neighbors know they exist if they're moving to a new area. That way, they could learn about what it does, what it's for, and if they have
about 30-40% of the people we serve are around the area, north and south, and I myself live in North Minneapolis. I have 5 students in the building, in the school. And we have, and when we move, we accommodate everybody. We are open to everybody. Mm-hmm. And we are a viable school, high school, one of the best high schools that is in the city of Minneapolis or state of Minnesota. And our name is Uber Medical Academy. You can check it. Everybody can check it. And we're serving everybody.
Mm-hmm. I just think for a school to move into a neighborhood, it's nice instead of, from a lot of the letters, it seemed as though instead of trying to become part of the neighborhood, it seemed like it's indifferent to the fact that it has neighbors. And I just want to know if you'd made any efforts to kind of bridge that gap. So
No, sorry.
Commissioners, I would point out that until you get the CUP and the lease is final, it's a little premature to advertise to residents as an opportunity.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was clarifying. Thank you.
Right. And are there any further questions of the applicant? Hearing none, we can see if anyone else would like to speak on this item. And just so I have a sense how many of you would like to speak. So we have at least 2, 3. All right. You can decide who goes first and come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
I sent a letter. I'm here actually I'm Vida Ditter. I am a member of the Bryn Mawr Neighborhood Association. I am also a 20-year member of the Bassett Creek Valley Redevelopment Oversight Committee. We have heard a little bit about the master plan that we drew up and which the City Council accepted in 2006. One of the reasons we did not address schools along Glenwood is that we already have a school at Cedar Lake Road in Glenwood. And on Highway 55, there are several more schools, and that's only 3 blocks north. And so it didn't seem appropriate to us to have schools in this general area. What we needed was to get retail into the area, retail and housing. And that is what we focused our attention on: mixed use, retail, commercial, housing. And the school does not fit that vision. We had, God knows, I don't know, umpteen public meetings where residents spoke out and gave us their wishes of what they wished to see along the corridor. And I can only tell you that when we heard about the PUC about 2-3 days ago, that's the first we heard that there was going to be a school in that property. I have to tell you that I live 2 blocks or 1.5 blocks from Anwatan, which is a public school, middle school, and Bryn Mawr Elementary, which is an elementary school. There is no way that school transportation uses are not going to affect the neighborhood. We have buses on Laurel all the time, and in winter they're running because it's too cold to shut the engines off as they bring kids or as they wait to pick up kids. This is not a good use on Glenwood. We're trying to make it an attractive place for businesses to come to, for businesses to build and put above. The Bryn Mawr Neighborhood Association has 4 members on the Rock, and at its meeting last Wednesday, it did a unanimous vote to support the master plan and to oppose the master plan for the valley and to oppose the school. They stood behind their members on the Rock back in 2006 when the plan was first introduced, and they are still standing rock solid behind. I've worked on the Bassett Creek Master Plan. I've worked on the Bryn Mawr Neighborhood Land Use Plan, small area. I've worked on the shrinking of the impound lot in order to get more development land for the Bassett Creek Valley. And I've worked on all the CACs for the Southwest LRT in order to ensure that we have transportation in and transportation out, that people who live in the valley can get themselves to job wherever they happen to be in the metro area, and for jobs maybe to come into the area. This school does not strike us. I'm sorry, I'll say it doesn't strike the BMNA, and it doesn't strike me as an individual. We have not had a chance as a committee, Rock, to say yay or nay as a personal having worked on all these land uses for that area, this does not strike me as a way to promote the area at all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next speaker. Please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Yes. My name is Pat Carney, and I own a building at 837 Glenwood Avenue, directly across the street from XL Labs 1000 to 1015, to the building in question. The only reason we ended up here is that I saw a sticker placed by a city worker on the tin shed across the street from my office. There's been no other contact with us up until the Bassett Creek, or until the Glenwood revitalization meeting, which was unanimously not recommended by that committee. I'm not on that committee, but I am, as a member kind of person, I'm on the Rock. I'm the new guy on the Rock. I've only been on it for 16 years, and Vita, who is a real veteran, has been on it much longer. And I'm also a member of the H&A board. And the H&A board has not had a chance to be able to vote on this because we haven't had a meeting yet. And it's the same with the Rock. Neither of us have had our opportunity to have an organized reaction to this proposal. Anyway, and no one has ever contacted me about the building, and they're going to be my next door neighbors. Anyway, we just think that there's a lot more answers to be gained. And if this building was, if this school decided to be 100 yards to the north or south of its location and not on our commercial street, everybody here would be welcoming the school. But this is the wrong spot. This is where we want commerce on the street, and we're steadily running out of properties where commerce can be built, which is exactly why the master plan was written the way it is, to give us commerce on Glenwood Avenue. This is not commerce on Glenwood Avenue. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next speaker, and please state your name and address. Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Coleman. I believe Commissioner Coleman has a question for you. I didn't notice it right away.
You mentioned that you'd like to meet with the applicant to answer some questions. Can you just tell us perhaps what some of those questions might be?
Well, in the long run, I'm afraid that no is our answer to any questions that we might have. But there are questions about the amount of parking, which is, there's like 60 parking spots for 400 students and 80 faculty members. That seems like not enough, especially high school students. That would be one. The building that they're replacing, or the tenants that they're replacing in this building, were not the best neighbors in the world. You know, they promised every year that they were going to improve the landscaping, and in 20 years they never planted so much as a weed. And it takes us a phone call to get them to mow the boulevards. Anyway, the most important thing is had they come to us first and said we want to be in the neighborhood, we would have turned over every stone to be able to find them a building other than on Glenwood Avenue. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. I mean, this is not a NIMBY group. This is a not in my front yard group. We don't want them in our front yard, because our front yard's going to be the difference between this being a vital neighborhood or a neighborhood of solid nonprofits that run from garage A, parking ramp A, that's going to end up all the way to Cedar Lake Trail sooner or later. I mean, we just every time we ignore our own plan, we have one less piece of property that we can count on. There just is less and less of them all the time, and this is a big one.
Right.
Any other questions?
I don't see any. Thank you.
Thanks.
And next speaker, please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Lisa Goddard, and I live at 290 Market Street, which is International Market Square. But I've only lived there for about 4 years, and previous to that, I lived in Harrison neighborhood and had been on the Harrison neighborhood board for many years. And part of the planning that went into the Basket Creek Valley Master Plan and some of the neighborhood meetings, I went into the near north side redevelopment plan, which is now Heritage Park. And so I've got a lot of history with some of the same things that have been talked about already. And I guess I want to reiterate something that Pat said at the very end, which is also what I had written in my very long email, is that we already have too many tax exempt parcels on Glenwood Avenue in particular, but in our neighborhood in general. We need tax generating properties here. We need residents that will help increase. I mean, we've been broken into this tiny, tiny little precinct, my area of the precinct. It's like, I think 700 maybe parcels that have voter eligible people in them, or something extremely tiny. It is amazing how small and powerless our precinct is. And to say that we're giving up the ability to bring in mixed use with residential on top, where we can start creating that sort of, I guess, mass of people where we can start having more of an input with our elected officials. The loss of that opportunity is very concerning to me in particular, and a lot of my neighbors as well. And then I wanted to speak to some of the other things that were brought up by the developer. And I guess for the proposed school applicant, yes, I'm not opposed to the school in general. I just think this is not the right site for it. And, you know, like Pat said, maybe somewhere else in the valley would be a great site. But what I wanted to ask was, one, how well did you publicize to the communities in the area, not just Harrison, because I live across the street, which is Sumner Glenwood. How well did you publicize to these communities about this meeting? And, you know, was it just to the neighborhood association, or was there emails, postcards, or whatever that went out? And then I also wanted to talk about the history of the Basket Creek Valley Master Plan and why this site may not have been investigated previously till now. And part of that is that plan was approved in 2006, I believe, right? And Ryan companies had been given exclusive development rights for a little while, and then that housing market crashed. And so then we had the Great Recession, and nothing happened. And then Ryan companies lost their exclusive development rights for whatever reason. I'm not judging. I have no idea why that went away, but they no longer have it. And then it sat vacant. There were no incentives to develop. There was nothing. And meanwhile, the attention for development went to other parts of the city. The North Loop, downtown, Loring Park area. So there hasn't been much interest in development of this area until more recently. And I know Wellington is doing, some development a little farther west. But what I'm saying about this whole site is the fact that nobody's really been interested in the last couple of years doesn't mean that nobody would have been interested and that this site would have been sitting vacant for a while yet. It just maybe needed the right incentives, and that this flipping it over real quick, making a decision to go to a tax exempt land use seems kind of short-sighted. And one last question for the developer / owner is, what I had understood there was a proposal to put in some like office mixed use space that came, I think it was in the newspaper or something. We heard about it not even that long ago, and wondered how that was generated and where that went to and why that went away. And then a question for the school is, now there's a brew pub opened up around the corner, and there will be a distillery around the corner opening soon. And how do those uses, not too far from a high school, affect your thinking of that site and the city's thinking of that site as appropriate for the other uses going on around it that we frankly would like to see more of?
All right. Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, and please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. President, other commission members. My name is Jerry Krause. I live at 417 Oliver Avenue South. That's in Bryn Mawr, just off of Penn Avenue. I'm also a member of the Bassett Creek Redevelopment Oversight Committee. I'm kind of in between Pat and Vita. I've only been there now 17 and a half years, and about 400 meetings later. I'm here to speak in opposition to the conditional use permit for the charter school. Someone else used the word indifferent about the neighborhood, or different to the neighborhood. This is kind of what I call the outlier. I know Mr. Abdul. I actually know Swervo. I like many of the projects that he has done. And I had high hopes for this project as well. But unlike every other project that I've been aware of over the last 17 years that needed some vote by the plan board or some consideration by the city, Mr. Abdul's group has not come to us to seek any kind of input or recommendation. That's his prerogative, I guess. But I know that staff report includes a reference to use policy 1.51 that says attention to surrounding uses, community needs and preferences. And we've only been able to express those apparently through some emails and also in this sort of short notice to this meeting today. A couple of other things in the staff report I'm not sure accurately reflect what's going on in the valley. If you've not walked through the valley, you would have a sense of what's going on or what has gone on over the last 17 years. I've watched about one parcel a year, and I can identify every one of those for you if you'd like, that has been redeveloped. This is one of them. There are a couple of other ones now in process. They mentioned the Wellington Group, which is doing the art space group and some commercial building to the west of it. But there's a reference to the fact that it's mostly built up with some potential for site development. I think that understates what's going on in the valley. Many of you are aware that the impound lot is being shrunk finally after many years of trying to deal with that issue, but the entire west side of Van Wyck Boulevard apparently is going to be ripe for development at some future date. The Van Wyck and 2nd Avenue parcels that Wellington has under control right now for development is there. And also you're aware of, I think, the banana along Interstate 394, which was referenced a little bit ago by Lisa, relating to the Ryan companies that used to have an exclusive development right where the new Southwest LRT station is to be located. As to the project itself, item number 4, there's a reference to sort of loading spaces and parking, and apparently by sort of squeezing everything possible into this parcel, they got to the minimum number of parking spaces of 60 that's allowed apparently under the city's guidelines. But I sort of question how 7 school buses are going to move, which I did some research earlier today. The school currently has 360 some students. The building apparently is going to have 24 classrooms with capacity for 20 students each. That means if fully occupied, 480 students, maybe more, I don't know. I'm not sure how you move that number of students through this area very effectively, and I only have questions, I don't have answers. And I understand the school has done tremendous outreach to the Somali community, which I think is highly admirable. But there's also a reference in their own materials, whether or not it's of any concern to you or to Mr. Abdul, that apparently they have been operating at a general fund loss over the last 2 fiscal years of a couple $100,000 each year. So I'm not sure exactly how this is going to fit very well with what's going on elsewhere in the valley. And as Mr. Carney has said, this is sort of a property that is in our front yard along this particular corridor. And the staff recommendation is that everything is consistent with these plans, and I'm not sure the 2017 plan calls for a mix of commercial and residential uses. The Basset Creek Master Plan calls for office, retail, housing, and densities of dwellings of 40 to 70 per acre, 40 to 75 per acre. And I'm not in opposition to charter schools. In fact, if you would have been at the Rock over the last decade, we had someone who approached us about a charter school, and we were actually quite enthusiastic. But it wasn't on Glenwood Avenue. It's on the site that now ArtSpace is going to be developed on. So we are not indifferent to the needs of developers and to the school, but I think it's the wrong use in the wrong location. Thank you. If you have questions, and more than willing to
Thank
answer.
you. I don't see any questions. And is
Thank
there
you.
anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have, let's see here, 2 applications before us, both conditional use permits. Are there any further questions, or would someone like to start off the discussion with a motion? Commissioner Lupipier.
Yeah, I had a question for the applicant regarding transportation to and from the site.
If you could come to the microphone.
So I'm sorry if I missed any of this earlier, but are all the students primarily arriving via bus, or do some plan to use I think the Metro Pass has a high school bus pass?
From my understanding, all high school students that live in Minneapolis are provided Metro Transit bus passes. And in that sense, this location is excellent for students that take public transportation.
So is there an estimate of how many buses will be coming total then, given that it's mainly
I
just...
think, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't looked at this in the last couple of days, but I think they planned for 6 or 7 potential school buses if
Thank you.
needed.
All right, Commissioner Ellison.
Clarify, Minneapolis Public School students receive the Metro passes if they attend Minneapolis Public Schools, not the charter school. I mean, the charter schools can do it, but they don't automatically.
Any further questions? Commissioner Lupipier.
So I guess my question is for the school to answer whether or not they're personally providing bus passes for their students or not, given that clarification.
We don't give them bus passes. We provide them buses.
And given the neighborhood's concerns that were raised earlier and in some of the letters about transportation, do you think that would be something you'd be willing to do, or no?
We can think about it, and we have a board, and we can do it, but we bring our students from Brooklyn Park.
Oh, but Minneapolis students, for example.
Yeah, Minneapolis students probably. It's
Okay.
even better for them to have buses, but we don't know the parents, what they're going to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Coleman.
Just a second. So the previous speaker stated 6 buses. Is that your understanding, or what is the number of buses? that
Right now,
you're-
we use 12 buses.
12.
And we're going to at least 15 if we fully enroll all the students we need.
Thank you.
Any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? We have 2 conditional use permits before us, one for allowing the school, the second for an increase in height for mechanical equipment. Commissioner Cogill.
I'm going to move that we deny the conditional use permit to allow a new high school in the existing building. And I will explain myself if I get a second, I guess.
All right, we have a motion to deny item A, the conditional use permit for a new high school. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. And Commissioner Kogel, and we should be sure if we are going to go against staff recommendation that we make some findings related to the criteria listed in the staff report.
Right. So looking at the policy guidance, land use policy, 1.5 suggests or says that we should be directing commercial and mixed use development. This is really a single use. It's not commercial by any stretch of the imagination. I'd also call it to question that the item number 4 under the conditional use permit, adequate measures have been or will be taken to minimize traffic congestions in the public streets. It doesn't sound as though the applicant has, or I have concerns about the applicant's ability to so far really fully investigate that issue with the number of buses that will be coming in, the fact that they haven't thought about investing in Metro Transit passes for their students. This is going to be a drastic change in location and is certainly a commercial corridor. And then I would also go to land use policy 1.10, support development along the commercial corridor that enhances the street's characters and fosters pedestrian movement, range of goods and services. I don't know if a charter school, I'm not convinced that a charter school would be within the scope of an enhanced good or service. In fact, I think there's certainly some amount of debate as to whether or not they enhance opportunity for the students of Minneapolis in general. And I don't know if that's sufficient, but those are some of my thoughts.
All right, and further discussion, Commissioner Coleman.
I'm going to speak because I have to leave at 5:30, so I may or may not be here for the vote. But I am convinced that the application meets the conditional use permit requirements. It is a permitted use. While there are some, as my colleague described, there are some land use policies that may or may not support that in totality. I do think that we have a responsibility for permitted conditional use to consider the conditions, and I believe that the conditions here are adequate.
Right, and is there any further discussion? So we have a motion to deny item A of the conditional use permit. Commissioner Kogel outlined some findings related to criteria number 5 related to comprehensive plan policies that through the Bassett Creek Valley master plan, other planning guidance, this area is guided more for retail and other commercial uses as opposed to institutional uses. He outlined some findings related to criteria 2, 3, and 4 that relate to traffic, adequate utilities, roads, enjoyment of nearby property, generally related to the number of buses that would be used to transport students to the site, and questions about the adequacy of the site's ability to handle that amount of traffic. And Commissioner Schrader.
I just wanted to chime in. I agree with Commissioner Coleman that this is it meets the standard for a conditional use permit. And that said, I think Commissioner Kogel really made some good points that the applicant really needs to think more about the impact of traffic, about how many buses are coming in and what that's going to do to the neighborhood.
All right. So if there is no further discussion, we have a motion and a second to deny item A. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman?
No.
Kogel?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Kranzer?
No.
Lipke-Pier?
Aye.
Magrino?
No.
Schrader?
No.
Sweezy?
No.
That is 3 to 5.
All right, and that motion fails. Would someone like to make an alternate motion? Commissioner Coleman.
I will move to accept the staff report and approve the 2 conditional use permits with the conditions as stated.
Right. We have a motion to approve item A, the conditional use permit. Is there a second?
A second with a condition? Or add a condition, I should say.
All right. So we have a second, and Commissioner Lupke-Pier, would you like?
Commissioner Coleman, would you consider adding or accepting a 6th condition that bus passes are mandatory for high school students residing in the city limits of Minneapolis in lieu of busing for those students?
I
or
would
for
like
discounted provided by the school.
Right. I would like an opinion from staff as to whether or not that's within our powers as a condition. It seems to me that it might be outside of our discretion.
Commissioners, some concerns have been articulated about whether the applicant is adequately addressing the transportation concerns and that there are more buses than perhaps anticipated on the site. So I believe a case could be made that free or discounted bus passes are reasonably related to the criteria for a CUP.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Coleman.
Yeah. If
And
I
we can
could-
ask the applicant to address that as
Yep.
well.
If I could, I would accept a friendly amendment, not specific to bus passes, but to alternative transportation to daily buses. That there would be some condition that the applicant consider or develop a plan for alternative transportation. And I apologize, I do have to leave.
All right. And we might ask the applicant to respond to addition of this potential condition.
With other charter schools I've been involved with, Public Works had been looped in, I think, because of the type of applications, and they did require a sort of modified TDMP. And so what I would recommend, if I may, or suggest, is to not be that specific, but to say that as a condition of approval, the applicant will consult with Public Works on some form of TDMP strategies.
Yeah. That sounds good. I mean, can I clarify and say though, it's fine. I find one thing particularly disturbing that the applicant does not seem inclined or interested in outreach to the neighborhood there and community they're moving into, and I find that to be a little bit sad because I always look for people to take a genuine interest in what their future neighbors are, whether they agree with them or not. Ultimately, what goes there, they are moving into a community, and it would be nice if at least they were saying hello. And so in this kind of effort, in particular, when people are raising concerns about things such as, the fact that it's not the business they thought it's not housing that they thought, and now they're going to have all these students, and how are they going to get there? And I don't know, there are 6 to 8 buses we heard, and then we heard 15 buses, and then alternative modes. I think, is that going to be 480 students, parents driving them there, which is even worse. So I guess I'm looking for a little bit of concern for the fact that they're moving into a community that's been there in a 100-year-old plus building. And I think that if they can kind of understand the reasoning behind it, and also from an ecological perspective, an environmental perspective, it would be better to reduce the amount of busing. If they can take city buses, it's also better for them to move around the city. So just finding solutions that are actually good ones all across the board, and not just we can stack a certain number of buses and so it doesn't block traffic and we're fine.
Yeah, and I think as part of your condition, if you want to say and look into use of city buses, my intent was actually to make the alternative consideration maybe broader.
Yeah, yes, and I find that keeps with the intent of what I'm saying. Thank you.
Right.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, feel free.
Just as a developer, I mean, we clearly have heard some of the concerns and will work with our tenant to address those issues. And again, apologize for the miscommunication on the whole traffic and the busing. So just wanted to make sure you knew that we will address the issues that we've heard today to try and come with a better solution for the neighborhood.
All right. So Commissioner Lupke-Pier, you're proposing to add a 6th condition. Shall we say that the applicant work with staff on alternative transportation solutions preferably including free or discounted.
Yeah, with like a
metro
TDM
transit.
plan and perhaps in conjunction with Public Works to, to tie it all together.
All right. So is there a second to add that sixth condition?
Second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion? If there is none, we can add that on a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries. We've added that sixth condition. Is there any further discussion going back to the original motion to approve now with six conditions? That sixth condition added related to transportation. If there is none, we have a motion and a second to approve item A. Clerk, please call the roll.
Cogill?
No.
Ellison?
No.
Cronzer?
Aye.
Pipier?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
5-2.
And that motion carries. Next, we have item B, the conditional use permit for the height of the mechanical equipment. Would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Sweezy.
I'll move approval of staff recommendation, letter B, to approve the conditional use permit for the increase in height.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the conditional use permit for height with the one stated condition. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Cogill?
Aye.
Ellison?
No.
Cronzer?
Aye.
Pipier?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-1.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 5, also concludes our business for today. We have committee of the whole on Thursday. Our next meeting is October 1st, and we are adjourned.